I'll give you a good example. It took me 17 years of being in business to get to earn $100,000 a year in an annual year. I'm coaching people now that's doing it in 2 or 3 years.
And it took you 7 years.
It took me 17 years.
17 years.
It took me 17 years to get to my first 100,000.
And you showing folks how to do it in
2 to
3 years.
Max. I'm talking from zero. Some people like yourself, you can get there in 9 months to a year because you have some stuff established.
Right.
But I'm talking about a person from zero in the industry of landscaping. I can take a person from zero to earning $100,000 in profits in 2-3 years max.
And so is this just for somebody who own a business, or is this somebody who's employed as well?
Well, I coach people that with a job. It's a certain way to make a job a business. And so we're coaching people, and I got people that double their income on their jobs by using the same philosophies and principles that we do to run a business. Most of the time I tell people, treat your job like a business in the sense of taking full responsibility,
right,
but treat your business as a job in the sense of being disciplined. I gave a quote the other day that if you don't discipline yourself for your business, somebody else will discipline you for theirs.
Oh, yeah,
so discipline is key. And so that was one of the things that I lacked. And I can go ahead and tell you this story since we're on the subject. I was sitting around a dinner table around some very successful business people. And I was looking around, not from an arrogant standpoint, but I looked at what their repertoire was and the things they were good at. And across the board, I knew for a fact that I was better than they were. Not arrogance. But the challenge I had was they were all millionaires and I was broke. And I started trying to figure out, what is it? Why are they successful and I'm struggling? And it came down to one word: discipline. And once I discovered that, it was like an epiphany. I was like, God, is that it? That's the only thing keeping me from me and my destiny is discipline? So then I became like super disciplined, like more disciplined I've ever been in my life. Okay. And that took me from having to borrow money from my 80-something-year-old mom to pay my bills to doubling my net worth in 1 year. Just by applying discipline. So you asked me about what would I do differently if I would go back in time. It would be mentorship and discipline.
Okay. And speaking of discipline, for those, because I know what discipline means, but for the viewers, we just want to break everything down in layman's terms. So for discipline, I know everybody think it could be something bad or it could be something that, just break down what you mean by discipline.
Discipline is consistently doing what you have to do in order to reach your dreams and goals. Not what you want to do, but what you have to do. So and the way you stay disciplined is you have to write it down.
Right.
And a lot of people overemphasize what they can do in a long period of time and underemphasize what you can do in a short period of time over a consistent period. You follow what I'm saying? So you have short-term and long-term goals. So my short-term may be, hey, let me just make one post a day for a month, right? And so that discipline is not in that it's so big that you do, it's the consistency of what you do it in. Same thing with saving money. Right. Some people say, well, when I get $10,000 out, no, save the first dollar. That's why we teach what to do with $1, not what to do with the first million. Because if you don't treat the first dollar right, you won't know how to ever get to the million, right?
Right.
So discipline is a matter discipline is an inward mentality, inward spirit about yourself that's manifested outwardly. But the challenge is that outward manifestation sometimes takes long. Some things you discipline yourself with is like a microwave. You see it instantly, within a matter of days. Some things like a crock pot, it may take 2 or 3 years for it to manifest, but the people think it happened overnight. They didn't see the work you put in 2 or 3 years prior to the display, the manifestation of your work.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I like that. I just had to break that discipline down for them because I know they think it could be bad and the whole time it could turn into a great person.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, heck yeah, I appreciate that. And my next question is, what is the biggest failure that you went through in your business, and what did you learn from it?
Wow, my biggest failure. I got so many. I've been failing forward for 38 years, so I got to think of a few biggest failures. One of my biggest failures was a couple of them. I got to tell you more than one.
Okay.
One of my biggest failures was not trusting myself when I got a great idea, and letting other people's influence deter me from pursuing an idea or a dream or a goal.
Kind of like telling the wrong person your dream.
Absolutely. And so I had a dream shot down, a multi-million-dollar invention. And I was the first to come up with it that I knew of. And I had it shot down, and 6 years later, they came up with the same design I created.
How'd that make you feel?
Made me feel real crummy. Like, I was like, I got to start trusting my own instincts.
Right.
And also, I had opportunities to diversify in business. And because it wasn't something that I knew a lot about or I felt really comfortable with it, then I elected not to take advantage of it. And there were $1 million opportunities way back when. And so I tell people all the time, there's no new money in an old comfort zone. So if you stay in that comfort zone, you can't expect to get new money in an old comfort zone. You got to step outside your comfort zone to get to the new money. You
got to get, as my bro said, you got to get uncomfortable.
Yeah, and you got to stay uncomfortable long enough till that action becomes comfortable. When you first start lifting weights, the first day you're sore. Next 2 or 3 days, it doesn't feel so bad. So you have to stick with it until after a while you feel good when you get through lifting weights. So you have to do the uncomfortable until it becomes comfortable. And so that's one of the things my mentor taught me, was that it's a process, but you got to start the journey. And back then, my biggest mistake was I was hesitant about starting journeys on things that I wasn't comfortable with. And so that's what I think some of my biggest failures. Another big failure was not having mentorship, not seeking mentorship. And I quickly outgrew the mentorship I had, and I should have continued to seek mentorship in a humble manner. So those are the few things I think I made big mistakes on.
Okay. So would you say failure is a bad thing or a good thing?
Failure is a good thing because failure shows you where your deficits are. For instance, if I was coaching a kid basketball, I want to talk about all the made shots. I would talk about all the missed shots.
So they can get better. Exactly.
So my thing, I tell my young people, my young employees even, I tell them, fail forward. By meaning that, by learn something from your failure and make it your business not to fail the same way twice. Don't make the same mistakes. But there's no progress without mistakes. Every great entrepreneur can tell you about thousands of failures, but you only know the iPhone. But you don't know how many they trashed before the iPhone came out. You know the T model car from Henry Ford, but you don't know how many cars in the graveyard, the mess ups. You don't read about that. You don't read about all the plays or movies that Tyler Perry failed on. You know the good ones he made it on. And so that's just the plight of being an entrepreneur.
It makes sense because I was just watching something and they were saying how everybody say Jordan, he just so clutch, he come through in the clutch, but nobody saw how many game winners potentially that he missed.
Absolutely.
They only saw the one down, they see the ones he made, and they said the ones he missed outnumber the ones he made.
And here's the thing about life. The ones you don't take, you miss all those. You miss every shot you don't take. So every opportunity that you don't take, you miss that opportunity.
You don't even get to learn from it.
No. So
that's hard.
So failing forward is actually the progress, because now you know what not to do in the next opportunity. But if you never try,
you would
never
stay
at ground zero.
That's hard. Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. Okay, so next question. What advice would you give to someone trying to pursue a career similar to yours?
I almost would say don't do it. But if you're going to be bullheaded and do it like you did anyway, and you're going to pursue a career in a trade like landscaping, is very challenging in that you have a lot of things like external challenges, like the climate, hot, the heat, the cold. You have to deal with a lot of different bells and whistles. You got to deal with employees. You got to deal with equipment. You got to deal with vendors. So there's so many bells and whistles to deal with. If it were me, I would advise a person to go in more technical fields where it's not as, conducive to good climate, good weather conditions, Perhaps you don't have to have as many people on staff to get yourself launched. So you have a lot of different variables in the industry of contracting, whether you're a painter, whether you're a roofer, whether you're a landscaper. There's so many things out there that has so many variables that it makes it very tough for a young entrepreneur. And then you got to go out there and produce. And so today's world, I think, is more advantageous for the new younger people. Now, there's going to always be a need for blue-collar businesses.
Right.
But I urge young people to, even if they want to do a blue-collar business, they need to diversify and make sure they have technology within their businesses.
Right.
And take advantage of technology. My son has a barbershop.
Right.
I said, son, you can only cut so many heads a day.
Right.
You can only cut hair so long.
Right.
Right. And that's whether you're painting cars. I got another son that paints cars for a living. Right.
Right.
You can only paint so many cars in a day. So one thing, no matter what business you're in, you got to get leverage.
Right.
Right. So you got to start duplicating yourself.
So explain that for me. Leverage.
Okay.
For those who don't understand what you're saying.
So leverage it comes different ways.
Right.
You can leverage. You can use leverage as money.
Right.
You can buy leverage, or you can use leverage as people. You know, people resource is the greatest resource of all. And so when you leverage, what I mean by that, I mean duplicating yourself. So every time you grow in your business, you want to replace yourself,
Right.
until you push yourself out of your business. Then you got a real business.
Right.
Other than that, you're really just self-employed.
Exactly.
So my goal is to teach my children to move from being self-employed to having a real business that makes money absent of their input.
Whether they there or not.
Yeah, whether they're or not.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Heck yeah. That makes sense. Make a lot of sense. Okay. So far as in the landscaping, would you recommend someone have to go to school to do a landscaping business, or what would you recommend if somebody said they wanted to start a landscaping business? Would they have to go to school? Do they need a trade, or can they just start with a push mower?
Well, sometimes I think education is overrated. It just depends. Okay?
Right.
So if you're a person that has been introduced to the industry of landscaping and you've had a good mentorship, perhaps you work for a family member or you did it in the summers when you were a child and you have a certain skill set, I wouldn't say go to school. What I would say is get a mentor that's in the industry and help them and let them help you set your business up for success. And so I've been mentoring children, and the information that I give to them is the same information that I lectured at Mississippi State, I lectured at Hines Junior College. So I'm giving them the best of the best with all the shortcuts included in mentorship.
Right.
Versus if you were to go to school, it'd be very mundane. They'll drag some things out, they'll stretch it out, and so you'll go 2 years to get 3 months worth of information.
Right.
So if you come to a person that you can get underneath and let them mentor you in that industry, then you get it from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Right.
So you get the best of the best information. And so really, in the industry of landscaping, landscape technology, I don't think a person, depending on what they want to do, if they want to be a landscape architect, of course they need to go to school.
Right.
But if you just want to run a landscape contracting business, the school of hard knocks, so to speak, is where you really want to go to enhance it. The key thing is having the humility to listen and take advice from a mentor. The second thing is having the discipline to carry out the task.
Right.
So that's what I would advise a person to do.
Yeah, that's hard. Heck yeah. Okay.
And one more thing while I'm thinking about it.
What you got?
With all these blue collar things, what I'm talking about technology is we have to learn to monetize our skill set and get leverage. We talk about leverage. So for instance, my son cuts hair, right?
Right.
And so he was cutting hair for the school when they were videotaping him, and he had like a big audience. He was doing different styles, and like he was on stage, and he said, "Well, Dad, they're not paying me a lot to do that." I said, "Son, the money is not what they're paying to be on stage. The money is in the content that you're creating on stage. You got to learn to monetize that content,
Right.
Because what you're doing can be duplicated. You see, because you can send that video out a gazillion times, but you're gonna cut one hair at a time.
Exactly.
But once you produce that one video, you can monetize that. So same thing for my son that's painting cars. You know, you can do a demo on how to paint a bumper, just using it for example, and now you can monetize that. So the same thing that I'm telling them to do is the same thing that we're aspiring to do with our landscaping. So you have to merge technology into the blue collar, and then I think everybody should have some type of footprint in technology for their income. 'Cause that's the way the world's going.
Exactly.
So whether you create some content, whether it's in the message form, whether you're teaching technical skills, whether you're giving mentorship advice, you need to be able to monetize that thing. Whether you write a book, make an audio, shoot a video, you need to be able to monetize that and take advantage of the techno world.
That's hard, man. Man, that was hard. Heck yeah, man. Okay. My next question. So how important? Okay, let me see. Okay, so how important is it to really do your due diligence on whatever industry that you choose to do far as an entrepreneur, instead of you saying, hey, I want to be a landscaper or something, but you just don't do your research, or basically how you feel about, example, you might have somebody who been welding 20 years, but haven't enhanced their knowledge at all in welding in over 20 years compared to somebody who just graduated 2 years ago and probably way more up to date than a 20-year vet. How do you feel about staying on top of your industry? You know what I mean? Like, not getting comfortable.
Education is key. I've been in it 38 years, and I probably studied harder than anybody I know. I studied harder than all my employees. You know, I read more magazines than all my employees. I think about new techniques, and I learn every job. I learn something from it, and I take one job to the next. Job.
Now.
Absolutely.
And how long have you been doing this?
For 38 years.
And you still learn every job?
Every day.
And that's hard.
I'm not in competition with my competitors in terms of other landscape companies. Right. I'm in competition with myself from yesterday to today.
Yeah, that's hard.
So tomorrow I got to be better than today. So I would tell a person to, if they're going to go in the industry, first do due diligence. Meaning run the numbers. You know, sometimes people want to do glamorous businesses like restaurants and nightclubs and things that look good, but they're not eating. I'll tell you one of the biggest things that people overlook right now.
What's that?
And that's the trash business. Trash business. I can take any young man with energy and put him in the trash business, and he'll make 6 figures in the first 18 months. Any young man.
An 18-year-old.
I take 18-year-old with good driver's license. Give him he has to have a commercial driver's license. Get a commercial driver's license, and he'll be 6 figures in 18 months.
Man, you can't even go to college and be 6 figures in 2 years.
By the time his comrades graduate college, he'll be probably worth about $500,000. By the time they get to paying their student loans off, he'll be worth $1 million in the trash business right now. With zero. He start with zero. And go into the trash business, and in 18 months he'll be doing 6 figures. But people overlook that because, who's going to throw trash? Who, you know, and the stigma they put on
and trash every day,
man, and this kind of thing. But just imagine this. This is how I look at how good a business would do. Right. How important is the business to society? Now, if you don't open up a nightclub, if you shut all nightclubs down in Jackson, what's the worst that can happen?
Nothing.
Okay, shut the garbage trucks down,
and
the grass cutting down for 1 month. What would town look like?
Gonna be an uproar.
So that means what? That means so that means trash is a business that is recession proof. I don't care what the economy does. You can't let that garbage sit on the curb. I don't care how bad or how good the economy. I don't care who's the president, who's not the president. You got to get that garbage out. So I tell young people, look at businesses that are absolute must. That's where I would start. So you're gonna always have to roof a house. You're gonna always have to unstop a toilet. You can't get away from that. And they're not going to create robots to do everything, right? So I would get into a field that is a necessary industry. Also, I will look at, can technology replace me in the next 20, 30, 40 years?
Right.
So technology cannot replace a person that prunes hedges.
No.
This is not going to happen, right? You know, maybe in 100 years they might come up with AI, but not in our lifetime. It wouldn't happen, right?
Nah, I don't see that
so
one.
You look at the industries that are recession-proof, that technology cannot weed you out.
Right.
And that's why I would start when
like a barber.
Yeah.
A barber.
Yeah,
a barber,
absolutely.
and you have to Beauticians,
And
barbers.
then I will look at the industries that are more receptive to being able to duplicate yourself. See, sometimes some businesses are so personal. And that's what I told my son about his barber business. Most people only want one person cutting their hair. It's real personal, because it's their body.
Right.
But in lawn mowing, people don't really care who mows the grass, as long as it get mowed right. Right.
To a certain degree.
To a certain extent. But you
But I know what you mean.
You can set your company up
right.
with the expectation on the way in that they'll be okay with it.
Right.
We've had experience where they want to see that same face, but if you set up right. But it's very difficult probably to set up a situation where somebody's different cutting your hair every time you go.
Right.
So that's a person, like your doctor.
Right.
I don't want to go to a different doctor every time I go. I want to go to the same doctor.
Exactly.
Some businesses you have to look at are very personal. Most doctors are slaves to their own business. They might make $300,000 a year, but the day they don't go, they go from $300,000 to zero. It's difficult to duplicate themselves, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's what I would look at if I were going to start a business, because basically you start a business to get freedom.
Right.
So you don't want to start a business and then become the worst boss to yourself that you ever had. See, I was my worst boss. I didn't give myself sick days. I didn't give myself vacation days. I worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. So I was the worst boss I could ever have. I couldn't go to no job and they treat me the bad as I treat myself.
Wow.
So I had to learn to duplicate myself and replace myself to get freedom. I was really a high-priced slave. Now, I paid myself very well, but yet at the end of the day I didn't go in, the day I stopped earning money.
So with that being said, you bring me to this question. So how important is time to you?
Oh, wow. Time. Let me give a perspective. Heaven, oxygen, and time. Okay. Heaven, oxygen, and time. That's how important it is to me. Because here's the thing. I can get more money. Matter of fact, you just print it every day. When they run out of money, they just print more money, right? So money's not that valuable, right? But time, the Creator only gave us a certain amount of time. And then the biggest thing is, we don't know how much time He gave us.
Right.
So time has to be the greatest commodity on earth after oxygen.
I agree.
Because if you can breathe, you can think. Food can't be number one. You can go without food for days.
I agree.
Right? But when your time runs out, it's over.
It's over. It's over.
So time has to be the greatest commodity.
I agree.
So I work now to protect my time. So if I think somebody can do a task that I can do, and here's the thing. Most time entrepreneurs are somewhat control freaks to a certain degree, right? And if we're very particular and stickler for detail, it's very difficult for us to trust somebody else to do our job. And this is what I found out, Will. I don't have to have another me. If it takes 3 people to equal me, and I can pay those 3 people half of what I would pay myself to do the same task, I'm winning. So I don't have to find another me. I can build a me and 2 or 3 other people to do the same thing I do. And still replace myself. That's the goal, to replace myself. So if it took 10 people to do what I do, as long as I replace myself, I'm winning.
That's the goal.
And once I replace myself, I build a system that I can duplicate, and then the money will grow.
Right.
But until I replace myself, the money cannot grow because it can only grow past what? My personal time. So I have to buy the times of others to leverage that time. I had a quote on Facebook the other day that we take our time and our talents and we sell it wholesale to our boss. He sells to retail and he keeps the difference. I said, why not sell yourself retail and you keep all the money?
Right.
So if you're going to trade your time for money, trade the highest rate available.
I agree.
But that's just step number 1. That's why it's called self-employment. You just own your own job. But from self-employment, if you want total freedom, you must move from that to having a business that operates outside of yourself. And think about it. If you can't go a week from your business and it generates the same amount of money, then you really don't have a business. You just
Yep. Yeah. Totally agree. So how do you feel about, I know you said something about monetizing your business, so how you feel about far as like the barbers, for instance, they could monetize their business by they building a personal brand with their customers. So why not drop a hoodies or hats or polo.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, or even in landscaping, you can monetize your business. Like you said, write a book, drop hoodies with your landscaping, sell them to your customer, you know.
Another great thing is a product line. Like you just said, that a lot of times, because like my son, I said, well, if you're cutting hair, how much hair grease are you selling? That same brush you're using, if you have an audience and you have content, they should pay you. They should sponsor you, whoever brush you're using, right?
Right.
Whoever grease you're using, whoever shampoo you're using. So it's monetizing all around you.
Yeah.
You have to just tap into it,
Right.
okay? And the product lines, why aren't you selling the best soap in the world for African American hair? Why aren't you selling the best soap in the world for Caucasian hair or Hispanic hair?
Right.
Why aren't you monetizing product lines through either direct selling yourself or you're representing companies through content and promoting their products? But if people are using products, they use it. See, here's the thing. You cut a hair for $50, right?
Right.
And it takes you 20 minutes. That's pretty good return on your time. But what if you sold 50,000 hair products and you only made $1 a piece? But you were selling it while you were asleep. I'll take the $1 a piece all day long.
Every day.
So that's what I mean by leverage. And people overestimate what they can do with their personal time and underestimate what they can do with a small spigot of somebody else's time. So I don't need all your time.
Right.
You can give me 100 of your time. All I got to do is find a way to get 100 people to buy in. And now I got to hold me. Now, if I create that and I duplicate that, then not only do I replace myself, but then my income can grow exponentially. Off my own efforts, my income can only grow as good as I am,
Right.
as efficient as I am. And no matter how good I am, I can't drive with one dump truck at a time. You know, I can't drive two, right? No matter how good I operate any piece of equipment in my repertoire, I only can get so good so fast. Then what?
Right.
And the challenge of that is my customers start to look at my techniques and my expertise, and now it even makes me more of a slave because now it's hard to duplicate 30 years experience on a piece of equipment. So I had to start dumbing down myself and say, you know what? No, you don't get me, you get him. And him and him and him. Now add all them up, you get a me.
Okay.
But not gonna be efficient because they've only been doing it 2 or 3 years versus my 38 years. And so your customer has a habit of comparing your staff 2 years experience to your 30 years experience.
Right.
And that puts you in a slave situation because now they expect you to be there to deliver at the same efficiency that you've always been doing. But you just have to look at your industry, whatever industry it is, and say, what's the average efficiency and put your people in that position instead of using your own. You understand what I'm saying? Instead
I know
of using
exactly.
your own efficiency rate.
Right.
And that may be totally different, and it may take more people to do what you're doing. But again, you don't have to find another you. You can build it if it takes 10 or 15 people. As long as you can replace yourself, that's the goal.
Yeah, I feel that. That's hard. And with some gems too. Okay. So with that being said, to piggyback off of what you just said, so how would you feel about a self-employed person who owns a business? He works in the business, and let's just say his goal was to retire from his business in 25 years, which is totally possible. Would you recommend, if that's the route he want to go, to monetize his business and create products? Because, and I want you to dive into this too, explain the difference in owning a business with a service and owning a business with products, and then owning a business with a service that also produce products.
Okay, well, that's a good question. Okay, so a service-oriented business takes up more of your personal time.
Correct.
All right, a product business, you can duplicate product distribution much easier than you can service distribution. Okay, because a product is a product. Let's say we have products in our industry like pine straw.
Right.
It doesn't take a rocket science to distribute pine straw, right? So you can duplicate that relatively quickly. Whether it's pine straw, whether it's decoratory rocks, whether it's soils or whatever, you can duplicate that very quickly. You just have to have a system of distribution in place.
Right.
But if you're doing a lawn service or pruning service, you have to have a certain level of skill set. That means a learning curve. That slows the growth of the business, is the learning curve. right? Doesn't take much learning curve to distribute products. You got companies you can contract that out to. Amazon will do it for you.
Right.
Depending upon what the products are.
Exactly.
So if you're in a service business, it's always good to have a product line within the service, right? That gives you some income without you having to actually be there, so to speak.
And then in the long run too, it helps you as far as in the future, because when you create that product, the product, you can stop cutting it, for instance, and the product still can be selling.
I'll give you a good example. The Kohler industry. You see Kohler plumbing?
Kohler. Oh,
Kohler,
yeah.
the Kohler.
Right.
Okay. One of the guys used to go to school with Kennedy Jet, right? And the guy said his dad was gonna make him work at the bottom, putting in toilets, right? So he can know the business.
Right.
Make a long story short, Kohler is one of the biggest suppliers of plumbing material in the world. But they started out installing toilets. And now they just distribute the toilets. The faucets and everything else. So they don't have to install toilets anymore. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing for them to have a department that does that, but the bulk of their income comes from selling toilets.
The products.
So if I'm installing Pine Straw, for instance,
right.
If I can go to just distributing Pine Straw, I can grow the business exponentially without having to have that long learning curve in there. So now the learning curve would be for a person that's exact to learn how to run the business versus learn how to produce in the business. So the Kohler grandchild, you have to learn how to produce in the business. He was learning how to install a toilet so he can learn how to be an executive in the business and know the ins and out of it. So he can run the business. Okay, it's a total different aspect. See, our children have to learn how to run the weed eater because we need to run the weed eater.
Right.
But it should be they know how to run the weed eater so they can know what's the ins and out of a weed eater when they get ready to sell one. That's a total different mindset of the learning.
I agree.
All right. Next thing you said, let's say a person does say, you know what? I don't want the responsibility of having a big business. I don't want the headaches. I'm not trying to get duplication. I just want to work 20, 25 years and I want to retire. Good. So here's the thing. They can take a financial calculator and figure out how much money they want in retirement, and they can find out what the interest rates are paying. Let's say on a mutual fund, let's say it's paying 10%. Use the calculator, and they tell them exactly how much money they have to put in every month to reach that goal. And they should be disciplined to do it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what most people do on a regular job, right?
Right.
They have 401ks, IRAs, they have pensions and all that stuff,
right.
So you create that for yourself. But the difference is you own your own time. So you don't miss the softball games, you don't miss the basketball practice because you make your own schedule.
Right.
That's the good thing about being self-employed is that you don't have to go on somebody else's clock. And you still got to put the time in.
Right.
The amount of hours not going to change, but you can manipulate when you work the hours.
Right.
I noticed that you're always there for your children. For every program they have, you're always there, right?
Yep.
That doesn't make your job any easier. It just makes you be able to manipulate the hours that you can be there for your family. That's a great thing about being self-employed. You can make your own hours, your own schedule, but at the end of the day, you have to have an ending game plan, or else you'll be like I was, 6 and still having to work.
Right.
But you're self-employed.
Right.
And sometimes a lot of people mistake being self-employed for actually having a full-fledged business, and they realize after so many years that it never's going to stop. And so some kind of way, and it's called insanity, you think you keep doing the same thing, you get a different result. No, you're gonna work till you die.
Right.
So you have to have an exit plan.
Right.
And so either you have an exit plan of investing your money wisely over a period of time, and now you can get your return, or you gotta have an exit plan to be able to build your business where you can sell it to somebody and have enough money to build, invest, and get a return, or you have to have a succession exit plan where you build other people around you and you replace yourself until you're out of the business, and then the business can continue and give you a dividend for the rest of your life. So those are the 3 ways you can retire from a business, or not retire from
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so to piggyback on something you just said, so how do you think how do you feel that it's important to have a purpose of why you starting a business? Like, for instance, for me, part of why I wanted to start a business was it was time. that was my number one purpose was time. Like, I used to be a manager and supervisor, and I used to just add up the time that I used to give my employers, and I used to give them 12, 14, sometimes 15 hours, and you only got 24. And it used to mind bother me that I only give myself 9 hours and I give them 15. I think I'm a slave, and that really used to get to me in a real way that I can't explain to nobody. So it was a point where I used to go to work and I used to tell everybody, oh, I won't be working here long, and I didn't even know what I was going to be doing. But I knew I had a purpose, that I wanted to be free. I wanted to, if my son have a program, I wanted to be there. If my son had this, I wanted to be. That's more important to me than $1. You know what I mean? And that's what motivated me to really start my business and be self-employed. It was my time getting back, and I wanted to ask you, how do you feel that it's important to have a purpose also when you start a business?
Wow. Okay, that's a whole lot. Okay, so let's start. You saying purpose. Let's go back. Remind me to get back to purpose. But let's go back to how I started my business.
Right.
Okay, I actually wanted to be a Domino's Pizza entrepreneur, franchise owner, right?
So you wanted to franchise your own Domino.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. That was my goal.
To own your own Domino, but franchise it.
And it wasn't about freedom, it was about money. Right. I looked at who's making the most money. And so when I used to work for an electrician, I always looked at, I'm making good money, but he's making a lot more money, and I'm doing all the work. So I quickly knew as a child, at 15 years old, I knew the way, and I'll tell you a quick story. I did a total electrical job for my boss, and he made $600 off the job. He paid me $40, which at that time was a lot of money. Now for a 15-year-old, most of my guys, I was making $40 a day, so I made $80. Most of my friends were making about $3 an hour. So they might make $20, $24 at McDonald's working 8 hours. So I was like almost doubling their income. So I was happy.
Right.
I was happy and I was satisfied. He paid me well, and it was fair pay for what I did. But when I looked at his paycheck, I said, even though it's fair and I'm not counting his money, I want to be on the other side of it.
Right.
So I knew then. So when I first went to Domino's Pizza, my first, I guess, full-time job as an adult, the first question I asked was, how do I own one of these? And they laughed at me. But in 2 years, I was right at qualifying to own one.
Wow.
After I got caught up in the corporate politics, and they wouldn't allow me to actually franchise, follow my dream, I felt like a runaway slave. It didn't matter where I went. I knew anywhere was better than here.
Right.
And so I just had to run.
So why did they want to let you franchise?
Well, it could be a number of things. Some of them felt threatened, and some of them may have looked at some other issues.
You said in 2 years, so to start somewhere and finish a franchise in 2 years, you had to be doing something right.
I was crushing them.
Yeah,
I was crushing them, and some of them probably thought I wanted a career within the corporate.
Probably felt intimidated.
Yeah. So that kind of led to, and I was immature, didn't know how to go over the head, didn't know how to navigate through corporate world. I was naive, thinking that I could just win on my merit. You follow what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I made a decision. When I'll tell you this, when my children were being born, I had twins coming. I was at the Domino's Pizza on this side of the street, Baptist Hospital on this side of the street. I couldn't get off work. Nobody would relieve me during the most important day of my life, my twins being born.
Wow.
A scheduled cesarean. I needed to be there. So I had to beg and plead a guy that was off work to come in and work for me for 3 hours. So I took my apron off, walked across the street, saw my twins being born, made sure my wife was okay, and then my mom and her mom was there, so I felt comfortable. Came back across the street, put the apron back on again, and went back to work, leaving my family in the hospital.
Wow.
That was the day, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. That was the day I made up my mind that I was never going to work for another person again. And that was the day I became psychologically unemployable. So I didn't need purpose. For me, I didn't need purpose. I just wanted freedom. Okay? And so after I got into an industry, then part of my purpose started to be in a hidden gift that propelled me through that industry. And I was writing in my book the other day, and I was writing that you want to pursue your gift, because that's the only thing I read in the Bible to make room for you. So an application, if you're using an application
Right.
that your gift makes room for you, then that's the best way. So your gift is tied to your purpose.
Right.
But in absence of you even knowing your gift, a skill will do. See, a skill will make you wealthy. You know, but a gift will make you wealthy and have purpose. But
hard.
I'd rather be rich without purpose than poor with it. Because you're poor, you can't properly pursue your purpose.
Right.
You can't be all God intended you to be if you don't have the resources.
Right.
Very seldom does that work.
Right. I totally agree.
So I would rather have the resources than find purpose. And that's what kind of my plight of my career was. So I started in landscape business because I had a friend of mine that wanted to go in business. Again, I didn't care what business it was. I just had to get away from that.
Yeah.
So once I had some success in that industry, then eventually I started to pursue my gift.
Gotcha.
And so that's why we're here now. Because I'm pursuing my gift right here. First podcast, right?
Heck yeah, man.
Okay.
First of many more. Heck yeah, man. And you said to pause you because I think you was about to say something else.
About the purpose.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
basically that is, I think purpose is essential, very important, but not absolutely necessary.
Right.
If you have a skill and you have a game plan, that skill can get you to any type of income that you want. But now we teach building wealth from the inside out. You follow what I'm saying? So it's different between being happy and having joy. So a skill set can help you be happy because it gives you all things that makes you happy. You know, income, some type of time, freedom, being able to buy the things you want to buy. But joy is an internal thing. And when you have joy, meaning that you're doing what you want, when you want, with whom you want, and you're able to pursue God's true purpose for your life. That gives you internal joy, internal peace that passes all human understanding. When you have that, and then the inevitable side effect from using that gift you have to serve mankind, the money has to trail.
Right.
Because money always trails service.
Right.
So purpose is very important, but it's not absolutely necessary to get the tangible things in life.
Right.
But to get the inward wealth, then yes, purpose is key.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's why, to piggyback on what I was saying, like I was saying, that was my reason